The alarm was already screaming when I reached the door. Not a test, not a drill. The kind of alarm that means the station's outer hull has been touched by something it was not supposed to be touched by, and that whatever is coming through that breach is not here for a diplomatic visit. My name is Sergeant Mara Voss. My official title aboard Concordat Station Vareth 9 is Interspecies Liaison Officer, Class 2. What that actually means in plain language is this. I translate. I smooth over misunderstandings between species who have spent centuries assuming the worst about each other. I shake hands, or tentacles, or fins, or whatever the relevant appendage happens to be, and I smile, and I make sure nobody accidentally insults someone else's ancestor gods during dinner. I carry a sidearm because the regulation says I have to. I have not fired it in 3 years, 2 months and 11 days. I was counting. The room I had just entered was the Grand Accord Chamber on level 7. The most heavily decorated, carefully temperature-controlled, symbolically significant room on the entire station. The walls were made of imported pale stone from 3 different planets, selected because none of them belonged to any species currently in a territorial dispute. The lighting had been calibrated by 4 separate committees to be simultaneously flattering and non-threatening to both human and Korathi eyes. It was also, at that moment, the room where Her Radiance Queen Savara of the Chirathi Dominion was standing at the head of a long table, surrounded by 6 of her personal guards. And it was the room I had just walked into because I had been sent to retrieve a translation document I had forgotten on the table earlier that morning. A small, embarrassing errand that I had timed for a quiet moment between sessions. The alarm changed everything about what quiet meant. I stood in the doorway. I looked at the Queen. I looked at her 6 guards, who were already moving, not toward the door, not toward a defensive position around their sovereign, but toward their own private comms, reading something on small handheld devices that blinked with urgent green light. I looked at the 4 human diplomatic escorts who had been stationed in the hall outside, and who were now visible through the door behind me, speaking rapidly into their own earpieces. Then I looked at the Queen again. She was the most extraordinary being I had ever seen in person. That is not sentiment. That is a simple statement of observable fact. The Chirathi are tall. She stood nearly 2.5 meters, and they are built along lines that suggest elegance without fragility. Her skin was a deep, iridescent gray-blue, like the surface of a calm ocean seen from altitude. She had 8 eyes arranged in a gentle arc across her upper face, pale violet in color, with pupils that contracted in response to stress rather than light. Her robe was the dark red of Chirathi sovereignty, embroidered with silver thread in patterns that each represented a territorial boundary her lineage had held for over 1,000 years. She was watching me, not her guards, not the door, not the alarm indicators on the wall panel. She was watching me, and her expression was the particular kind of unreadable that told me she was reading me very carefully indeed. One of her guards, the one closest to the window, a heavy-set Chirathi male with a scar along his lower jaw, spoke. Not to me, not to the Queen. He spoke into his calm and rapid Chirathi, a dialect I understand well enough to catch the important words. I caught them. Evacuate, shuttles, coordinates, now. The 4 human escorts reappeared in the doorway. The one in front, a young man named Gareth Cole, barely 26, who had been on his first diplomatic rotation, looked at me with an expression that wanted permission. Evacuation protocol, he said. All non-essential personnel to the emergency bays. Orders from command. She's not non-essential, I said, nodding toward the Queen. Gareth's eyes moved to the Queen, then to the 6 guards who were already drifting, subtly but unmistakably, toward the secondary exit on the far wall. His mouth opened, closed. The guards are taking her, he said. They have a shuttle waiting. Command says, Gareth. I kept my voice level. Look at the guards. Tell me where they are moving. He looked. I watched the understanding settle into his face the way cold water settles into a low place. The 6 Chirathi guards were not moving toward the Queen. They were moving toward the exit. They were leaving. They were leaving. And the Queen had not moved. And she had not been told to move. And the expression on her face had not changed from the one she had worn since the alarm began, the expression of someone who has just confirmed something she already suspected. Go, I told Gareth. I said it without anger and without drama. Take your team. Get to the emergency bay. Sergeant Voss, the protocol says. The protocol, I said, did not anticipate this specific situation. Go, that's it. Order from the senior liaison officer on this level. I'll file the variance report myself. Gareth hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Then he left. The guards filed through the secondary exit. The last one paused, and for a moment I thought he was going to say something to her. He did not. He closed the door behind him, and the sound it made was very final. The alarm kept screaming. The Queen and I looked at each other across 12 meters of pale imported stone, she said, in perfect standard. The kind of perfect that tells you someone practiced it for years before they ever used it. Will you leave as well, Sergeant? I thought about it for exactly as long as it deserved, which was not very long. No, Your Radiance, I said. That's not something I do. Something moved behind her violet eyes. I could not name it. I filed it away. Then we have a problem, she said. We have several, I agreed. But I only need to solve them one at a time. I crossed the room, picked up my translation document from the table, because I had come here for it, and there was no reason to leave without it. And then, I moved to the door panel, and locked every entrance I could reach from that console. 14 locks. 3 of them were decorative, installed for ceremony and not rated for actual security. 2 of them, the station's designers had thoughtfully made from reinforced composite. I locked all 14 anyway. It cost me nothing. I turned back to the Queen. Your Radiance, I said. I need to ask you to move away from the windows and toward the interior wall. The pillar on your left will provide the best cover if the outer glass takes impact. She moved without argument. That surprised me a little. You have done this before, she said. It was not a question. Not exactly this, I said, but something like it. I checked my sidearm, full charge. I checked the emergency kit mounted to the wall near the service corridor. A standard station kit, intended for fire and medical emergencies. Not for whatever this was. Inside, 2 smoke canisters, a thermal blanket, a basic med, 4 magnetic door spikes designed to jam sliding mechanisms, a small handheld light, and a nutrition bar so old that the expiration date had worn off. I was already revising the plan I had not yet admitted I was making. Through the locked door I heard footsteps in the corridor, multiple sets, moving fast, not the rhythmic careful movement of station security. Something looser, less coordinated, the kind of movement that belongs to people who are confident they are in hostile territory, and are not particularly concerned about being quiet. Ashkar Syndicate. It had to be. The syndicate had been trying to derail this treaty for 8 months through legal channels, lobbying, and what diplomatic communiques politely called economic pressure. When those options run out, some organizations pivot. The syndicate had resources. They had people. And they had, apparently, at least one cooperative Chirathi Guard commander who had been happy to clear the room for them. I did not say any of this to the Queen yet. Instead, I took the 4 magnetic door spikes and pressed them against the bases of the 2 strongest, rated doors. They engaged with a low, satisfying hum. I positioned myself between the Queen and the most likely entry point. I checked my sidearm one more time. The footsteps in the corridor paused outside. The Queen was watching me with those 8 pale eyes and the expression that I still could not name. Surgeon Voss, she said quietly. What is your first name? It was such an unexpected question that I almost laughed. Mara, I said. Mara, she repeated, as though testing the weight of it. I want you to know that whatever happens in this room, I am aware of what you chose to do. And I am aware of what everyone else chose. Thank you, Your Radiance, I said. Savara, she said. I looked at her. My name, she said, is Savara. If we are going to face this together, you may use it. The door shuddered. I raised my weapon. All right, Savara, I said. Stay behind me. The door shuddered again, harder this time. Something on the other side was trying a thermal cutter. I could smell the faint edge of superheated composite. The magnetic spikes would slow it but not stop it. I had maybe 90 seconds before the first one came through. I thought about the layout of the room. I thought about angles and distances and the things I knew about how people move when they expect resistance, and when they do not. I thought about the smoke canisters and the service corridor behind the Queen and the ventilation grate in the upper right corner that was, according to station schematics I had reviewed once during a security briefing, just large enough for a person to move through if that person was motivated. I thought about Gareth Cole, somewhere in the emergency bay, probably filing the variance report himself just to have something to do with his hands. I thought about the nutrition bar in the emergency kit, and whether this was going to take long enough that we would need it. Then the door came open, and I stopped thinking and started working. There were 2 of them. The first one through moved fast and low, the way people do when they have trained for entry work. The second one stayed high at the threshold, covering. They were good. They were not good enough. The first one I put down before he cleared the door frame. The second one had time to see his partner fall and to redirect his aim before I was already moving laterally. Not away, but across. And the shot that was meant for center mass went past my left shoulder and scored a black line across the pale imported stone of the wall. I put him down too. The corridor went quiet. My ears were ringing. My heart was doing the thing it always does, loud, fast, completely unhelpful. and I let it do it while I moved back to position and kept my eyes on the door. I heard a sound behind me and turned. Savara was standing exactly where I had left her, behind the pillar, with both hands pressed flat to the stone at her sides. She was looking at the two figures on the floor. Then she looked at me. "I have never," she said, very carefully, "seen a human move like that." I reloaded. "There's a reason," I said. "They stopped putting us in arenas." She was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she said. "I am beginning to understand that." The alarm was still going. The corridor outside was quiet in the particular way that means people are reorganizing. I had maybe 5 minutes before they came back with more and a better approach. I looked around the room. I looked at the two smoke canisters. I looked at the ventilation grate. I looked at Sivara. 5 minutes was enough to make a better plan. I started making it. The smoke from the first canister was still settling when I finished jamming the ventilation grate closed with the second. Magnetic spike. The grate was not a way out. I had realized that fast enough. The shaft bent 30 degrees within 2 meters and opened into a mechanical room with no exit to the safe areas of the station. What the grate was, however, was a thing that people who did not know the station layout would assume was a possible exit. People who think a target might be running tend to position themselves differently than people who know a target is staying put. That difference matters. Savara watched me work without asking what I was doing, which I appreciated more than I could easily say. People who ask questions at the wrong time during a dangerous situation are genuinely one of the more challenging parts of dangerous situations. When I finished, she said, "You are buying time." "Yes," I said. "For the Concordate forces to respond." "Yes," I said. "And for the station to figure out what is happening and reroute internal comms so I can reach someone." She nodded slowly. "And how long will that take?" I thought about the Concordat fleet response protocols. I thought about the distance from the nearest patrol point to Vareth 9. I thought about the time it would take for the evacuation alert to reach a command officer senior enough to authorize a rescue operation, and for that officer to contact the fleet, and for the fleet to actually move. "A few hours," I said. "At least." She absorbed this without visible distress, which told me something about her. "And how many of them are out there?" she asked. "Enough," I said. "I'm not going to give you an exact number because it won't help you and it might distract me." A pause. "That is a reasonable position. Thank you." I moved to the center of the room, checking angles again. The two doors I had not been able to spike were weaker. Service access points, rated for foot traffic and nothing more. If the Ashkar team had any kind of organized tactical sense, they would hit both simultaneously on the next attempt and try to divide my attention. "Savara," I said. "Yes. I need to tell you something about what I heard your guard say before he left." She went very still. Not the stillness of surprise. The stillness of someone who already knows what is coming and is choosing to hold themselves in place while they hear. It said. "He said evacuate," I continued. "Shuttles, coordinates." He was not responding to the station alarm. He was responding to a pre-arranged signal. "Yes," she said. "That means someone in your guard knew this was going to happen." "Yes," she said again. "That means someone told the Ashkar Syndicate when you would be here, in this room with reduced security." "My guard commander," she said. "His name is Vareth. Not the station. The name is common. He has been in communication with certain Dominion political factions for several months. I became aware of it 6 weeks ago. I was building a case." She paused. I had not moved quickly enough. I looked at her. "You knew there might be an attempt." "I knew there were people who wanted this treaty to fail," she said. "I knew Vareth had been compromised. I did not know the specific shape this would take, or the timing. I chose to come anyway because if every sovereign hid from the people who wished them harm, nothing would ever be signed." She met my eyes with all 8 of hers. I made a calculated decision. The calculation did not fully account for the willingness of my own guard to leave me. There was something in her voice when she said that last sentence. Not grief, exactly. Something older and quieter than grief. I did not have a useful response to it, so I did not offer one. "All right," I said. "Then here is where we are. The Ashkar team outside does not know your guard left without you. They will not know that until someone tells them. And your guard commander has reasons to let them think you were successfully extracted before the breach. Because that is the version of events that makes him look least like what he is. Which means, for the moment, they may not be certain you are still in this room." She was listening. "That uncertainty is the most useful thing we have," I said. "I want to keep them uncertain as long as possible. The longer we keep them uncertain, the more cautious they move. The more cautious they move, the more time passes. The more time passes, the closer the fleet gets. And if they become certain, then we deal with that when it happens," I said. "One problem at a time." She made a sound I had never heard before, a low, soft harmonic note that the translation implant behind my ear did not render into words. I looked at her. That is the Chorathi expression, she said. For something between amusement and admiration. There is no single word for it in standard. I'll take it, I said. I moved to the service corridor entrance and listened. Quiet, but the wrong kind. The kind of quiet that is actually a lot of very careful movement, happening just out of earshot. I came back to the center of the room. The next wave will be larger, I said. How do you know? Because the first two were a probe, I said. They were testing the room, testing the resistance, seeing what they were dealing with. Now they know what they are dealing with. They will respond accordingly. And what are they dealing with, she asked. Accurately, not diplomatically. I looked at the door. One human sergeant, I said, with a sidearm. 2 smoke canisters, one of which is already used. 4 door spikes, a med pack, and a nutrition bar of unknown age. She looked at me for a long moment. And yet you are not afraid, she said. I am absolutely afraid, I said. I am quite significantly afraid. My heart is going about twice as fast as it should be. My hands are slightly unsteady. And I have a strong and very specific desire to be somewhere else. She tilted her head. Then why? Because being afraid doesn't change the situation, I said. The situation is what it is regardless of how I feel about it. Being afraid and doing the work is the same amount of effort as being afraid and not doing it. So I raised my weapon slightly and watched the door. I do the work. The sound from the corridor changed. 2 directions at once. Left service door and main entry, exactly as I had predicted. I was already moving toward the angle that covered both. Stay low, I said, over my shoulder. She went low. They came through fast. And there were 6 of them this time. Split 3 and 3 across both openings. And the room filled with shouting in Ashkar trade dialect and the hiss and crack of weapons fire. And I moved through it the way I had been taught to move, the way I had practiced until it stopped being thought, and became something more like breathing, automatic, continuous, necessary. When it was over, 4 of them had retreated back through the doors. 2 had not. I was breathing hard. My left arm had taken a glancing hit from an energy discharge, not a direct impact, a surface burn, the kind that hurts significantly without doing serious damage. I pressed my arm against my side and held the position for a moment, counting, making sure my hands were steady again before I moved. Her voice was low and very clear. I turned. Savara was standing behind the pillar where I had told her to stay. She was looking at my arm. It is not serious, I said. I know, she said. I have battlefield medical training. I can tell the difference. Of course she did. She was a queen, yes, but she was a queen who had shown up to a contested station in a contested political climate, with full knowledge that someone in her own guard had been compromised. She was not the kind of person who lacked preparation. There are bandages in the med pack, I said. Left side of the kit on the wall. She retrieved them without being told, twice, crossed the room, and began wrapping my arm with a precise, efficient movement that confirmed the training she had mentioned. I watched her hands work, and thought about how strange this was, and then I stopped thinking about how strange it was, because strange was not a useful category right now. Vareth underestimated me, she said, as she worked. He thought I would panic, that I would try to negotiate, that I would be manageable. He was wrong, I said. He was wrong about me, she said. He was also wrong about you. He thought there would be no one here worth accounting for. She tied off the bandage. He did not anticipate a human who would stay. Most people don't. She stepped back and looked at me. Why is that, in your experience? I thought about how to answer that honestly. Because most people think staying is a choice you make after you have done the math, I said. Calculated the odds, weighed the risk, decided the outcome is likely enough to justify the cost. And when other species look at a situation like this, they do the math and the math comes out against staying. So they leave, and they assume we did the same math. But you did not, she said. I did, I said. The math came out against staying, but I stayed anyway. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, why? I looked at the door. Because the math is not the only calculation I know how to run, I said. We had a window of quiet then. 3, maybe 4 minutes where nothing came through the doors. I used it to drag the furniture closer to the main entrance, building up something that would slow the next entry even if it could not stop it. Savara helped without being asked, moving the heavy stone table with a strength that reminded me that Chorathi are not small people. We worked side by side, and neither of us spoke, and it was one of the more comfortable silences I had shared with anyone in a long time. When the barricade was as good as I could make it, I sat down with my back against it and checked my remaining charge. Savara sat beside me, not quite close enough to touch, which felt like its own kind of statement. Can I ask you something? I said. You may. Did you actually come here expecting to sign this treaty? Knowing what you knew about Verath. She was quiet for a moment. Yes, she said, because the treaty matters more than the risk. A peace agreement between the Charathi Dominion and the Galactic Concordat would end 40 years of slow-motion conflict. It would mean safe shipping lanes for 12 inhabited systems. It would mean students from Korathi worlds could attend Concordat universities, and Concordat researchers could study in Korathi archives. And children on both sides could grow up without learning that the other side is an enemy before they learn anything else. She paused. Verath wanted to stop that. The Ashkar Syndicate profits from conflict, so they wanted to stop it. I decided that the number of people helped by the treaty was larger than the number of people harmed by the risk to me. The math came out in favor of coming. I looked at her. So you did the math, I said. I did the math, she agreed. And then, with something I would almost have called a smile if I had known what a Korathi smile looked like. But I came anyway. From outside, I heard the sound of movement reorganizing. I got to my feet. Rest if you can, I told her. I will not be able to rest, she said. I know, I said. Rest anyway. I moved to my position. The third wave was coming, and I had one smoke canister, 6 rounds plus whatever I could recover, one bandaged arm, and a queen at my back who understood why someone would do something even after the math told them not to. I thought that was, all things considered, a reasonable combination. I watched the door. I waited. I learned something about Savara during the quiet period that followed the third wave. She did not fill silence to comfort herself. Most people do. When the world becomes uncertain and the threat becomes present and real, the instinct to speak, to hear a voice, even your own, even saying something meaningless, is very powerful. It is not a weakness. It is simply a human thing, and from what I had observed, it was also a Korathi thing and a Neth thing and an Arvathi thing. Silence during danger makes the danger feel larger. Sound makes it feel smaller. Savara did not do this. When there was nothing useful to say, she said nothing. She sat with the quiet and let it be quiet, and I did not have to spend any part of my attention managing her fear on top of managing my own. That is a harder skill than it sounds. I have known soldiers who did not have it. The third wave had hit us 20 minutes earlier, 7 of them, better coordinated than the second group, using a staggered approach that was clearly the work of someone with actual tactical experience. They had learned from the 2 previous attempts. They knew the room layout now. They knew there was a single defender. They knew or suspected that I would move laterally, and that the best way to counter that was to close the angles. They were right about all of it. What they had not accounted for was the smoke canister deployed at the moment of entry, which reduced their visibility to near zero in a room they did not know as well as they thought, and the fact that in low visibility I had a significant advantage because I had already memorized every piece of furniture, every distance, every surface in the room during the first 2 quiet periods, walking the space with my eyes closed until I knew it by feel. 4 of them retreated. 3 did not retreat, but they were also no longer a problem, and I had 3 more retrieved power cells from 2 of the weapons they had left behind. My arm was complaining. I ignored it. I sat down against the barricade beside Savara and catalogued what I had. The medpack had 1 more bandage strip and a small tube of wound sealant. I had 11 rounds plus the 3 retrieved cells, each of which would give me about 4 more shots depending on the weapon compatibility. I had no more smoke. I had the nutrition bar. I took the nutrition bar out and looked at it. Hungry, I asked. Savara looked at it. What is it? I genuinely do not know, I said. It is very old. It is probably edible. It is called a ration bar. She took it from my hand, examined it with the particular scrutiny of someone who has eaten at state dinners, and is now being presented with a foil-wrapped mystery, and then took a bite. She chewed. She considered. It tastes, she said, like compressed disappointment. I laughed. I could not help it. The laugh was real. The specific kind of laugh that only comes out when something is genuinely funny at a moment when nothing should be funny, and the contrast is so sharp that your body just gives in to it. She looked at me, and one corner of her mouth moved in a way I had not seen it move before. There is no Charathi word for that thing you just did, she said. Laughing? The thing underneath it, she said. The decision to laugh when the situation is not laughing appropriate. We have a concept for it, but it is considered a character flaw. In humans, I said, it is considered a survival mechanism. Yes, she said, I can see that. She took another bite of the ration bar. We sat together in the quiet, in the dim room, with the barricade at our backs, and the broken doors held shut by magnetic spikes, and the hum of the station alarm that had become, after hours, almost something I did not hear anymore. Can I ask you something? She said yes. What were you before this? Before the Concordat, before the liaison work, ground forces, I said. 3 deployments. 2 uncontested colony worlds, 1 on a ship during the Riken border conflict. That was a significant engagement, yes. Were you afraid then, she asked, not with skepticism, with genuine curiosity, the kind that is actually trying to understand something. Every single day, I said. And you continued, and I continued. She was quiet for a moment then. I have read reports about human soldiers, studied them in fact before this summit. The Karathi military academic community finds humanity. She paused, choosing the word carefully. Difficult to model. Difficult to predict. You mean difficult to predict, she agreed. Most species optimize for survival, not in a cowardly way, simply in a rational way. A soldier who calculates that the mission has become non-survivable will generally disengage. This is logical. This is how a species preserves the capacity to fight again. But humans, she paused again. Humans appear to have a secondary consideration that overrides the survival calculation in specific circumstances. The scholars disagree about what that consideration is. Some say it is social bonding, the inability to leave companions. Some say it is territorial instinct. Some say it is a cognitive failure, an inability to correctly assess risk. And what do you think, I asked. She looked at me for a long moment. I think, she said, it is something closer to what you said earlier. The math is not the only calculation you know how to run. I think humans have a second system of decision-making that functions independently of survival probability, and I think that system is activated by something like principle, or loyalty, or simply by the sense that a thing ought to be done, regardless of what it costs. I thought about that. The scholars who call it a cognitive failure, I said. What is their evidence? That it leads to your deaths at statistically elevated rates, she said. And the alternative, I said, is longer lives spent in situations where we left. She said nothing for a moment. Yes, she said, quietly, I take your point. The comms panel on the wall let out a short, sharp chirp. I was on my feet before the second chirp, moving to the panel, pressing my hand to the authentication reader, waiting. Static. Then a voice I did not recognize, filtered through layers of encryption. Verith 9 Auxiliary Channel 7, this is Concordat Emergency Relay. Any personnel sheltering on Level 7, please respond. I pressed the transmit key. Relay, this is Sergeant Mara Voss, Liaison Officer, Level 7 Accord Chamber. 2 personnel, secured position, hostiles active in corridor, do you copy? A pause. Copy, Sergeant. Can you confirm? Do you have the Chorathi dignitary with you? I looked at Severa. She's with me, I said. Another pause, longer this time. When the relay came back, the voice had changed slightly. Somebody senior had just leaned over somebody junior's shoulder. Sergeant Voss. Fleet response is en route. Estimated arrival is 3 hours and 40 minutes. Can you hold your position? I looked at the barricade. I looked at the retrieved power cells. I looked at my arm. I looked at Severa. Yes, I said. Stand by. We will maintain this channel. I stepped back from the panel. Severa was looking at me. 3 hours and 40 minutes, she said. 3 hours and 40 minutes, I confirmed. She nodded slowly. What do we do? I sat back down beside her, which was becoming our natural arrangement in the quieter stretches. We make sure we are still here when the fleet arrives, and the Ashkar team will not simply wait. No, I said, they won't. She looked at the door, then back at me. Tell me what you know about them, the Ashkar Syndicate. Not the diplomatic version, the actual version. So I told her. I told her what I had learned during 3 years of liaison work and 1 year before that of ground intelligence briefings. How the syndicate operated, how they made decisions, what they were willing to do, and what they considered too costly. I told her about their commander structure, which was flatter than most military organizations, and depended heavily on individual cell leaders having wide authority to improvise. I told her that this meant they adapted quickly, but also that they sometimes adapted in conflicting directions when a situation deviated from the original plan. She listened. She asked questions, sharp, specific questions that showed she had already done a great deal of thinking about the syndicate, and was now cross-referencing what I was telling her against what she already knew. We had been talking for about 40 minutes when she said, "They will try to contact me directly." I looked at her. Their plan required my capture, she said. Alive, a dead queen is worth nothing to them. The value is in the ransom, and in the political leverage of holding me while the treaty discussion collapses. Now that their boarding team is significantly reduced, and they know there is active resistance, the logical move is negotiation. They will try to reach my personal communicator. I had not thought about the personal communicator. Every Karathi royal carried one, a direct line device keyed to their biological signature. They might offer a deal, I said. They will offer a deal, she said. They will offer me safe passage in exchange for the human defender, you, and withdrawal of the treaty proposal. I sat with that for a moment. And if they do, I said, the practical option is not one I will take, she said, with a firmness that left no space for discussion. I looked at her. Savara, I want you to think about this clearly. I am thinking about it very clearly, she said. I have been a queen for 19 years, Mara. I have made decisions that cost people their lives. I have sent soldiers into situations where the math was not in their favor, because the strategic value was sufficient. I understand how these calculations work. She met my eyes steadily. This is not one of those situations you chose to stay. You have held this room through 3 engagements. You are injured. You are operating with insufficient equipment against a significantly larger force, and you have not once suggested that I should attempt to negotiate my own safety at your expense. That is not a math problem. That is a question of what kind of queen I intend to be. I did not say anything. Also, she said after a moment, with the careful precision of someone choosing to say something lighter on purpose. You are the only person on this station who has demonstrated that they can actually keep me alive. Handing you over would be strategically inadvisable. I looked at her for a long moment. You were going to lead with the strategic argument, I said. Yes, she said. And then I decided the true argument was better. The communicator on her wrist pulsed. She looked at it, looked at me. Ashkar channel, she said. Don't take it, I said. Not yet, let them wait. Every minute they wait is a minute they are not certain. She let it pulse. It pulsed 3 more times and went quiet. We sat in the silence. My guard commander, she said, Vareth, when this is over, there will be a process, a formal inquiry, political hearings. It will be very loud and very long, and at the end of it, the most likely outcome is that he will be removed from his position and placed under a form of house restriction for a period of years. And then, in time, he will probably be quietly rehabilitated, because he has allies in certain factions who will argue that he acted out of political conviction and not personal gain, and that distinction matters in our system. That doesn't sound like justice, I said. No, she said. It sounds like politics. She paused. I have been doing this long enough that I can tell the difference, and I am still not always certain which one I am participating in. Is that part of why you came, I asked? To do something that was just clear? Something where the right answer was obvious? She looked at me with an expression that, this time, I was beginning to be able to read. Yes, she said. Partially yes. The door on the left shuttered. Not a breach, a test. They were checking the spike again, verifying it was still holding. 4th wave, I said. How many do you think? More than before, I said. They're running low on patience and their timeline is not infinite. If the fleet is 3 hours out, they know it too. They'll want to end this before the Concordat gets here. What do you need, she said. Practical. No drama. I looked at the room, at the remaining furniture, at the walls, the angles, the height of the ceiling, the placement of the light fixtures. About 10 minutes to prepare, I said, and then I need you to do exactly what I tell you when I tell you. You have 9 minutes, she said. Use them. I used all 9. When the 4th wave came through, 9 of them, the most yet, coming through both doors almost simultaneously, they walked into a room that looked, for the first 2 seconds, like an empty room. The barricade had been moved. The lights had been adjusted using the environment panel. The smoke from the last canister had been held and released at the precise moment of entry rather than earlier. 2 seconds of confusion. In a tactical situation, 2 seconds is a very long time. I was not where they expected me to be. When it was over, my arm was worse. I had used most of the recovered cells, and 5 of the 9 had retreated. 4 had not. I leaned against the wall, breathing. Savara appeared at my side with the med pack. Sit, she said. I'm fine. Sit, she said again in the tone that probably moved entire ministries. And I sat. She worked on my arm in silence. I watched the doors. Outside I could hear voices, low, urgent, frustrated. They were running out of people to send in. They were also running out of time. They will try something different next, I said. Yes, she said, wrapping the last strip of bandage around my arm with tight, careful turns. What? They might try to reach the power systems for this level. Cut the lights entirely. Or they might try to communicate with you directly again. Or they might decide that alive was a preference and not a requirement. She went still for a moment. If it becomes the third option, I said, quietly, I need you to get through that service corridor and into the ventilation shaft on my signal. The shaft does not go anywhere useful, but it will take time, and time is what we need. And you? I will be providing the signal, I said. She was quiet. Mara, yes. That is not acceptable to me. That is not acceptable to me, she said again. Her voice was not raised. It was exactly the same volume it had been for every sentence she had spoken in the past several hours. But it had a quality in it now that I had not heard before, a kind of solid weight, like a door closing. We agree together. I looked at her. Together, she repeated. I thought about arguing. I thought about pointing out that this was not a policy discussion, that there was a practical reality at work here that did not care about agreements. I thought about the fact that she was objectively more important than me, not as a person but as a political entity, as a living piece of a peace treaty that would affect 12 inhabited systems. I thought about all of that. Together, I said. She nodded. 40 minutes passed. The comm channel from the Concordat relay stayed active, updating every 15 minutes with the fleet's position. 2 hours out, then 90 minutes, then 60. At 45 minutes from estimated fleet arrival, the communicator on Savara's wrist pulsed again. She looked at me. This time I nodded. She opened the channel. A voice came through, calm, unhurried, male, speaking standard with a Ashkar Eastern accent. Her radiance. I hope you are comfortable. I am, she said. Your team has not made conditions here particularly inconvenient. A pause. You are being guarded by a single human soldier. I am accompanied by Sergeant Maravas, she said. We have made several attempts to secure the room, the voice said in a tone that acknowledged this without dwelling on it. We have lost significant personnel. This was not the expected outcome. No, she agreed. I imagine it was not. I would like to propose a solution that serves both parties, the voice said. You leave the room with your personal safety guaranteed. The human is surrendered to us. The treaty proposal is withdrawn, not permanently, simply tabled for future discussion at a more appropriate time. Savara looked at me. I kept my face still. She looked back at the communicator. I have reviewed your proposal, she said, and I find it without merit. A pause. Your radiance, you are asking me, she said, to betray someone who chose to remain when every other person in this room chose to leave. You are asking me to treat loyalty as a negotiable asset and protection as a commodity to be traded when the cost becomes inconvenient. Her voice was level and clear and carried the particular quality of someone who has decided something firmly and permanently. A queen who does that is a queen who deserves neither the title nor the treaty. I decline your proposal. I will not be making a counter-proposal. This channel is now closed. She closed it. The room was very quiet. I was looking at her. She looked back at me, and this time I could read the expression entirely. It was the same one I had seen traces of since the beginning, since she had watched me lock the doors and check the kit and move to position. The expression that is not quite surprise and not quite recognition but something in between, the specific look of someone seeing a thing they had been told did not exist and finding that it does. Together, she said. Together, I said. I handed her one of the recovered weapons. I showed her the charge setting and the sight alignment, and where to hold it so the recoil would not throw her off. She learned quickly, which also did not surprise me. 22 minutes. The final wave was different. Not larger. They did not have more people to send, but they hit simultaneously on all 3 remaining entry points, including the service corridor I had not been able to seal, using the last of their breaching charges all at once. A final coordinated push designed to overwhelm a single defender who could only be in one place at a time. I was not in one place. I had explained the plan to Savara. Her role was specific, contained, and required her to be in exactly one position. She held that position without flinching. My role was not contained. When it ended, the room held 2 people still standing. Neither of them were Ashkar Syndicate. I was sitting on the floor because sitting seemed like a reasonable choice. My arm was not good. Nothing else was seriously wrong, but my arm was not good. Savara sat beside me. She did not speak for several minutes, and neither did I. Then she said, "How long?" 18 minutes, I said, give or take. She nodded. We sat together, and the comms relay updated us at the 12-minute mark, and then the 8-minute mark, and then the station shuddered with the specific deep vibration of a Concordat fleet vessel achieving docking contact. And 3 minutes after that, the main doors of the Accord chamber came open from the outside, with the controlled force of a rescue team who did not know what they were going to find. What they found was this: Sergeant Maravas, sitting on the floor with her back against what remained of the barricade, arm bandaged in medpack strips, sidearm across her knees, eating the last section of a very old nutrition bar, and beside her, her Radiance Queen Savara of the Korathi Dominion, first of her name, sovereign of 14 systems, sitting on the pale imported stone in her treaty robes, with a recovered weapon, resting across her own knees, and the expression of someone who is waiting for the next thing with complete patience. The rescue team's senior officer, a young lieutenant named Owen Marsh, who would later tell the story many times, stopped in the doorway and stared. I looked at him. "Took you a while," I said. Owen Marsh opened his mouth, closed it, looked around the room, looked at me, looked at the Queen, looked at the room again. "How many?" he said. I told him. He stared at me for a long moment. "How?" he said. I finished the last of the nutrition bar and stood up carefully, because my arm was reminding me about itself. One at a time, I said. Savara rose beside me, smoothed her robe, and looked at Lieutenant Marsh with 8 violet eyes, and the full authority of a queen who has decided something important and is not done deciding it. See to Sergeant Voss's arm immediately, she said. And then please prepare a secure channel to my government. We have a treaty to finish signing. Owen Marsh said, "Yes, Your Radiance," in a voice that was doing its best, and turned to issue orders. And I caught Savara's eye for just a moment. She made the sound again. The low harmonic note. The one her translation implant did not render into standard. This time I did not ask what it meant. I already knew. The station smelled like itself again. 3 days after Owen Marsh and his team had come through the Accord chamber door, Vareth 9 had been cleaned, repaired, repressurized in 2 sections that had been vented during the breach, and declared secure by Concordat Fleet Command. The pale imported stone in the Accord chamber had been polished until the marks were mostly gone. Mostly, not entirely, because some marks in stone go too deep for polishing. I had been in the medical bay for 26 hours. My arm had required 2 surgical interventions and a bone stimulator on the deeper burn, which the station doctor, a patient woman named Clara Finch, who had clearly seen worse and did not seem alarmed by me in the slightest, described as manageable. I was on restricted duty, which in practical terms meant I was not supposed to lift anything heavier than a datapad, and was not supposed to fire a weapon until my next review in 6 weeks. I'd been given a private room, which was unusual for a sergeant of my rank, and when I asked about it, the aide who brought my meals said only that the Queen had requested it. On the 3rd morning, I received a formal summons to the reception hall on level 3. I put on the cleanest version of my uniform that I could manage one-handed, and I went. The reception hall had been hastily but carefully decorated. Someone had found the Chorathi ceremonial banners that the summit team had packed before the evacuation and hung them alongside the Concordat blue and gold, and the result was either a very meaningful gesture or a significant improvisation, depending on how you looked at it. There were perhaps 30 people in the room, a mix of Concordat diplomatic staff, the surviving members of the Chorathi delegation who had returned to the station when it was declared safe, and Owen Marsh, who was standing near the back wall looking like he was trying to occupy as little space as possible. Savara was at the front. She had changed from the dark red treaty robes into formal reception attire, a deep silver black that caught the light differently as she moved, embroidered with patterns I did not recognize from the territorial designs. She stood straight and looked, at a glance, entirely unaffected by the past 3 days. At a second glance, she looked like someone who was choosing, with considerable effort, to appear entirely unaffected. I stood at the entrance. She saw me immediately with 8 eyes. There is not much she could not see, and made a small gesture that meant, in Chorathi formal protocol, "Come forward," which I had learned from a briefing document 9 months ago and had never expected to be the recipient of. I came forward. The room was quiet. "Sergeant Mara Voss," she said, in standard, in the clear carrying voice of someone who has been making formal pronouncements since before I was born. In the period between the breach of Concord at Station Vareth 9 and the arrival of fleet assistance, you chose to remain in a secure location under hostile engagement conditions when withdrawal was available, and when all other personnel had withdrawn. You held a position through multiple engagements, under significant physical duress, without relief or reinforcement, and you ensured the safety of a foreign dignitary, in a manner that prevented serious political harm to both the Chorathi Dominion and the Galactic Concordat. The room was very quiet. In recognition of this, she continued, "I am formally nominating you, under Article 14 of Chorathi Royal Charter, for appointment to the Sovereign's Guard, the first appointment of a non-Chorathi individual in the 312-year history of that institution." I heard Owen Marsh make a sound at the back of the room. I looked at Savara. She looked back at me with all 8 pale violet eyes, and the expression I could now read completely. "Your Radiance," I said. "Savara," she corrected. I paused. "I am honored deeply, but," she said, because she was good at reading people. "I am a sergeant," I said. "It suits me. The liaison work suits me. I would not be good at the ceremonial elements, and the Sovereign's Guard deserves someone who can be present for all of it, not just the parts that do not require standing still in formal attire for extended periods." Something moved in her face. "I wore a formal robe for 11 hours while being shot at," she said, very precisely. "And I was perfectly composed throughout. Your Radiance," I said, "you are a queen. I am a person who eats ration bars of unknown age and makes plans one problem at a time. These are different life paths. She looked at me for a long moment. "I will not change your mind," she said. "No," I said. "But I am genuinely grateful that you tried." She was quiet. Then she said in a slightly different register, not the formal voice, but the one I had heard in the dark room with the barricade at our backs. "You should know that I have briefed my government on the full details of these events. The role of my guard commander, the failure of the protective detail, the decision-making that left me in that room." She paused. "I have also briefed them, in full, on what happened inside that room, on what one human sergeant did and why and how. Savara, I am not asking you to accept any formal recognition," she said. "I am telling you that the information exists, that people know, that the story is now part of the record." A pause. "I believed you should know." I did not have a good response to that. I accepted it. The treaty signing happened the next morning. A new date, a new session, with significantly heightened security, and the addition of 2 Concordat fleet officers stationed inside the chamber itself. The Charathi delegation was accompanied by fresh guard detail, whose background checks had been conducted by an independent security firm that reported directly to Savara. I was there as liaison officer, at my usual table, with my translation documents. Savara walked into the room with the measured, unhurried pace of someone who does not recognize threats as a reason to change her gait. She passed my table on her way to the signing position, and did not stop and did not look at me. But she made the sound, very quietly, the low harmonic note, just enough for me to hear it. I looked down at my translation documents and did not say anything. The treaty was signed. 6 months passed. I was transferred to a different station, Orva 3, further out, doing the same work in a quieter sector. I had filed my variance report about the evacuation decision, which had generated an inquiry, which had generated a formal review of Concordat emergency protocols, which would eventually result in 3 paragraphs of amendment to the liaison officer conduct guidelines. I would never read those paragraphs, but someone would. Gareth Cole had written me a letter. He had put in for a transfer to the Ground Diplomatic Corps. He had also apologized, which I had told him was not necessary, because it was not. He had followed protocol, and protocol had not anticipated the situation, and those are not the same as a failure of character. He had written back to say he understood, but he was apologizing anyway. I found that reasonable. My arm had healed. Clara Finch had cleared me for full duty at the 6-week review, and told me I had good bone density for someone who kept putting their arm in the path of energy weapons. I had not spoken to Savara since the morning after the treaty signing. There is no protocol for staying in touch with a foreign queen, and I was not the kind of person who manufactured reasons to send messages. I was in my office on Orva 3, working through a stack of translation requests, mostly commercial, a trade dispute involving shipping manifests, and a disagreement about what a particular Karathi trade term actually meant in standard. When my aide knocked, "There is a Karathi diplomat here to see you," she said. "Junior attaché. She says it's personal." I looked up. "Personal?" That's what she said. I set down the translation work. The young Charathi woman who came through the door was perhaps 25, formally dressed, clearly nervous in the way of someone who has been given an important errand and does not want to fail it. She introduced herself as Attaché Veri, seconded from the Korathi Dominion Diplomatic Office. "Surgeon Voss," she said. "I have been asked to convey something to you directly, from Her Radiance." "Go ahead," I said. "There is a phrase," she said carefully, "that has entered common use in the Dominion since the events at Vareth 9. The phrase is Voskar." She paused. "It is used to describe a person of complete reliability, someone you can depend on absolutely, regardless of the circumstances. Literally, it translates as, one who remains." She met my eyes. "Her Radiance asked me to tell you that the phrase has become widely used, that children in several Dominion school systems are being taught it as an example of a particular kind of character, that in several Karathi governance discussions, it is now used as a compliment. To call a diplomat or an official Voskar means that they are the kind of person who does not leave when the situation becomes difficult." I sat with that for a moment. "She also asked me to tell you," Varys continued, "that she uses it to describe herself. When asked by her court what she learned at Vareth 9, she says she learned what it means to be Voskar, and that she is trying to be." Varys paused one more time. "She said you would understand why she thought you should know that." I looked at the young attaché. I thought about a room made of pale stone from 3 planets. I thought about the sound of magnetic spikes holding a door. I thought about a nutrition bar of unknown age and a queen who ate it without complaint and said it tasted like compressed disappointment. I thought about 8 pale violet eyes watching me lock a door, and the question that had come from them, "Will you leave as well?" And the answer I had given without thinking, The answer that had not felt like a choice at the time, but simply like the only true thing available. To say yes, I told Varys, I understand. She nodded, bowed slightly in the Karathi formal manner and turned to go. Varys, I said. She stopped. Tell her. I thought about what to say. I thought about it for a long moment. Tell her that I am glad the bar held. Varys looked uncertain. The bar. She will know what it means, I said. After Varys left, I sat in my office for a while without working. The translation requests sat in their stack, patient and undemanding. Outside the window, the transit lanes of Orvith 3 moved with the quiet regularity of a sector at peace. Kortha transports and Concordat vessels sharing the same lanes. Navigation codes exchanged without incident. Schedules coordinated through a system that had not existed 8 months ago. 12 inhabited systems. Students and researchers and children who were learning about each other now, instead of learning that the other side was the enemy. I thought about all of that. Then I picked up the translation documents, found my place in the shipping manifest dispute, and got back to work. One problem at a time, that is in the end all it ever is.